Dear soul, they did it. They finally confessed, and I want you to sit with that for a moment before you read another word. I want you to close your eyes, place your hand over your heart, and feel the weight of what that means. Because this is not a small thing. This is not an ordinary moment wrapped in ordinary words. This is the kind of moment that people spend entire lifetimes waiting for. The kind of moment that rewrites everything you thought you knew about the story you have been living, and it has finally arrived for you. From up here, where the light does not cast a shadow, and time bends like gold in the afternoon sun, we watched it happen. We had front row seats to the whole beautiful trembling scene. We saw the exact moment the pen was lifted and held above the page, hovering there in the air, like a bird afraid to land. We saw the hand shake. We saw the long shuddering exhale before the ink finally met the parchment. We saw the way they paused 3 times, put the pen down, walked away, and came back again, because some truths are so enormous that even the person holding them needs a moment to gather the courage to release them into the world. We saw the exact second their trembling fingers pressed the wax seal flat, pressing down hard as if to make it permanent, as if to say, "There, it is done. It cannot be taken back now." It was a letter addressed to you, written in your name, carrying a truth that had been locked away behind iron gates for years and years, collecting dust in a place where the light almost never reached. And for the longest time, you walked the earth, not knowing any of this. You moved through your days carrying a question that had no answer, a silence that had no explanation, a distance that had no map. You wondered if the silence meant absence. You lay awake in the dark hours of the night, staring at the ceiling, turning the question over and over in your mind like a stone you could not put down no matter how heavy it got. You wondered if the space between your hearts had become too wide to cross. If the quiet that stretched between you was proof of something broken, proof that what you thought was real had only ever been one-sided. Proof that they had moved on and found a way to live a life that did not include you in it. And worse than all of that, on the hardest nights, in the loneliest corners of your mind, you wondered if they had never truly cared at all. If you had imagined the whole thing, if you had built a cathedral in your heart for someone who had never even noticed the door. But, looking at the page now, looking at the words that sit there quiet and raw, and completely honest, the truth is laid bare in a way that cannot be argued with, cannot be explained away, cannot be dismissed. The words say simply and completely that you are the only reason they ever stayed, even when the world told them to run, even when every voice around them was pointing toward the exit, and telling them that leaving was the smart thing, the safe thing, the logical thing to do. You were the reason they did not go. You were the reason they planted their feet and held their ground, even when holding their ground felt like standing in the middle of a hurricane and refusing to move. Let that settle into your spirit. Do not rush past it. Do not read those words and immediately start wondering if it is really true, or what it means, or what happens next. Just let the words land. Let them find the places inside you that have been cold and quiet for so long. Let them wash over the years of doubt you have been carrying, the sleepless nights that piled on top of each other until they felt like a mountain, the exhausting echo of what if that followed you, from room to room, from day to day, from season to season. Let all of that begin to loosen and soften and fall away, because the truth has arrived, and the truth is that you were never forgotten. You were never truly left behind. Now, from where we sit, watching souls move through their human experiences, we have noticed something that most people on Earth misunderstand about love, and about staying. The world tends to think that staying is easy. The world looks at two people who remain connected, and assumes that the connection must be simple and comfortable and uncomplicated. That if someone loves you, they just stand still without any effort, that love is a calm and peaceful thing, that asks nothing difficult of the person who holds it. But that is not what we saw, that is not even close to what we witnessed, when we watched this person who loves you move through the days and months and years of their life. We saw the storm they were walking through, and it was not a small storm. It was not the kind of rain that passes in an hour, and leaves the air smelling clean and fresh. It was the kind of storm that tears things up from the roots, that floods every road you thought you knew, that makes it almost impossible to see your hand in front of your face. We saw the chaos spinning around them, the kind of chaos that comes from inside a person when they are at war with themselves, when they want something so badly that it terrifies them, when they love someone so deeply that the love itself feels dangerous. We saw the voices, and there were so many of them, an endless, deafening chorus of voices coming from every direction, from the people around them, from the world they were living in, from the logical part of their own mind, from the wounds they had been carrying, long before you ever arrived in their life. Every single one of those voices was saying the same thing: leave, pack up, turn around, walk away, run if you can. The world told them that loving you was too heavy, not because you are too much, but because love like the kind they feel for you asks a person to be completely open and completely vulnerable, and that kind of openness is terrifying for someone who has been hurt before, for someone who has learned the hard way that being fully seen by another person can sometimes end in devastation. The world told them the timing was wrong, and maybe on paper, the timing did look wrong. Maybe there were circumstances stacked against you both, practical things, logistical things, the kind of things that people point to and say, you see, this is why it cannot work, this is why you should let it go. The world told them, the risk was far too great, that the potential for heartbreak was not worth the gamble, that the smart thing, the self-protective thing, the reasonable and responsible thing to do was to close that door and bolt it shut, and never look back. Every logical signpost on their path pointed toward the exit. Society pointed there, fear pointed there, logic pointed there. Their own old wounds and old stories and old ways of protecting themselves pointed there. If you had been standing outside their life, looking in, armed with nothing but facts and reason, you might have agreed that leaving was the sensible choice. That is how convincing all of it looked from the outside. Yet they stayed. Ride that again. They stayed. Not because staying was comfortable. Not because staying was the path of least resistance. Not because everything lined up perfectly, and the universe handed them an easy road and said, here this way, it is all clear ahead. They stayed because your soul was an anchor they could not cut loose from. Even when they tried, even when they genuinely, desperately tried. Because there were times they tried, there were times they laced up their boots and stood at the door, ready to go, convinced that leaving was the only way to protect themselves, and maybe even to protect you. There were times they told themselves it was over, that they needed to move forward, that holding on was only keeping them both in a kind of limbo that served no one, and every single time, something stopped them, a quiet whisper, an inexplicable pull, some deep and wordless knowledge in the center of their chest that said, not yet, not this, stay. They tried to build a wall between your world and theirs. They picked up the bricks one by one and stacked them carefully, trying to create something solid and impenetrable, trying to convince themselves that if they could just build it high enough, the feeling would stop, the love would fade, and they could finally move forward into a life that made more logical sense. But the bricks kept crumbling. Every wall they built fell apart before it could be finished, because love like yours is not built on conditions that can be unmade. It is not a structure that needs maintenance or a feeling that can be argued out of existence. It is woven into the fabric of something much deeper than logic or circumstances or fear. It is written into the design of who they are and who you are, and what the two of you mean to each other, at a level that neither of them fully understands, but both of them have always felt. Think back now. Think back through all the months and all the seasons of waiting and wondering. Think about the moments that stood out to you, the ones you could not quite explain, the ones that did not fit neatly into the narrative of absence and silence that you had been trying to make sense of. Do you remember those moments when you felt a sudden, inexplicable warmth in your chest, out of nowhere, not brought on by anything you could point to, not connected to anything that was happening around you, just a warmth that arrived without explanation, and sat with you for a while before slowly fading? Do you remember those quiet evenings, when you were deep in your loneliness, when the ache of waiting had worn you down to something thin and tired, and then out of nowhere, a wave of peace moved through you? A peace that did not belong to the circumstances you were in, a peace that felt like it came from somewhere outside yourself. That was them. That was the energy of their soul refusing to leave your side, even when their human body was paralyzed by fear and standing far away. The soul does not follow the same rules as the body. The soul does not care about distance or timing, or the walls that people build around themselves when they are afraid. The soul goes where it belongs, and their soul has always known exactly where it belongs. So even in the periods of silence, even in the stretches of time, when no words passed between you and you were starting to wonder if you had been completely forgotten, they were there. Their spirit was beside yours, just beyond the edge of what you could see with your eyes, or touch with your hands, but present in every quiet moment, every unexpected wave of warmth, every sudden and sourceless feeling of being held. They were fighting a battle you knew nothing about. That is perhaps the most important thing to understand, as you sit with this confession, as you begin to let the truth of it rearrange everything you thought you knew. The silence was not indifference. The distance was not absence. What looked from your side, like someone who had simply let go and moved on, was actually someone in the middle of an exhausting internal war, fighting every single day between the terrifying vulnerability of loving you and the perceived safety of running away. On one side of that war was everything they felt for you, enormous and undeniable, the kind of love that does not ask permission and does not listen to reason. On the other side was every fear they had ever accumulated, every wound they were still carrying, every voice telling them that opening up to love this completely was the most dangerous thing a person could do. They wore a mask of distance to protect themselves, not to hurt you, never intentionally to hurt you. The mask was for their own protection, a shield they held up, because being fully seen, being fully known by another person, being completely without armor in front of someone they loved. This much felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, and though they wore that mask, though they kept the distance, though they gave you silence when what you needed was words. Their spirit never moved an inch from yours. Not one single inch. The love did not waver. The connection did not dissolve. Underneath the mask, underneath the fear, underneath all the noise of the war they were fighting with themselves, the truth remained exactly what it has always been. This letter that they sealed in your name, this confession that has finally found its way out into the world, is more than just an acknowledgement of what they feel. It is a surrender. It is the moment they finally put down every weapon they had been using against their own heart and said, "I cannot fight this anymore." It is them admitting that the universe won, that no amount of logic or self-protection, or carefully constructed distance, could change what was always going to be true. It is them acknowledging that no matter how many miles they put between you, no matter how many distractions they threw in the way, no matter how many times they told themselves to let go and move on, your name was written on the blueprint of their heart, before they even took their first breath on this earth, before they knew your face, before they had heard your voice, before the two of you had ever stood in the same room and looked at each other. The connection was already there, woven into whoever they were always going to be. We watch so many souls arrive here, carrying the weight of letters they never sent. It is one of the most common griefs that crosses the threshold with people when they come to where we are. They arrive holding words in their hands that they never spoke, truths they kept folded up in their pockets for so long that the paper started to disintegrate, confessions they rehearsed 1,000 times in the mirror, but never found the courage to speak out loud to the person who needed to hear them. They arrive with the full weight of everything unsaid, pressing down on them, and they look back at their lives, and at the people they loved, and the regret is a very particular kind of sorrow, that is unlike any other kind of sorrow we have seen. It is the grief of the possible, the mourning of what could have been, if only the words had made it out of the heart and into the world in time. But your person broke the cycle. They did not add to that long and heartbreaking list of letters, never sent, and truths, never spoken. They braved the terror of being completely seen. They looked at everything the world had told them to build, all the walls and the logic, and the self-protection, and the reasons to run, and they chose the truth instead. They sat down in front of a blank page, with a heart full of everything they had been holding back, and they let it out. They let it be real. They let it be permanent. They pressed the seal and made it so. They confessed that you were their quiet harbor in the middle of a hurricane. Think about what that means, what that image holds inside it. A harbor is not a glamorous thing. It is not flashy or dramatic. It is simply a place of shelter, a place where a ship can come when the sea is too violent to keep sailing, a place that holds steady while everything outside it moves and crashes and threatens to destroy. You were that for them, when everything in their life was moving too fast and threatening to come apart, when the storm inside them was at its worst. The thought of you was the one thing that held still. The thought of you was the one thing that did not shake, and that is no small thing. That is in fact, everything. To be someone's harbor is to be the most essential kind of presence in another person's life. It means that when they are at their most lost and most afraid, they look up, and they look for you, because something in them knows that where you are is where they can breathe again. They confess that without you, the world was just noise, that running away would have just been a slower way of losing themselves. Those words deserve a moment too. Think about what it means to have found in another person something so essential to your own sense of yourself, that leaving them behind would not be an escape, but a kind of gradual erasure. The world is full of noise. It is full of distraction and demand and busyness and voices all competing for your attention at once. Most people find ways to move through that noise and still feel like themselves, still feel oriented and grounded, and connected to who they are. But this person discovered that the thing that kept them feeling like themselves, the thread that connected them to their own center, ran through you. Without that thread, the noise was all there was. Without the anchor of you, they were just drifting through the chaos, with nothing to hold them in place. And you, dear soul, through all of this, through all the waiting and the doubt, and the long stretches of silence, you were doing something remarkable without even knowing it. You were being their lighthouse. You thought you were the one standing in the dark, waiting for a signal that never seemed to come, wondering if anyone out there could see you. You thought you were the one lost, and hoping to be found. But that is the thing about lighthouses. They do not know from their own perspective how far their light is reaching. They do not know which ships, how far out in the dark water, are using their light to navigate. They just keep shining, because that is what they do, and you kept living. You kept being yourself. You kept your heart open, even when it was painful and exhausting to do so. You kept the light on, and that light was reaching further than you knew. That light was reaching all the way to where they were, in the middle of their private storm, keeping them from crashing against the rocks. You were their secret strength. That is perhaps the phrase that will take the longest to absorb, because it requires you to understand yourself in a completely different way than you have been understanding yourself. You have been thinking of yourself as the person waiting, the person hoping, the person who was perhaps not quite enough to make someone stay. But the truth is the opposite of that. You were the reason they could stand up again when they had been knocked down. You were the thought that gave them one more breath when they were suffocating under pressure. Not because you did anything dramatic or extraordinary, not because you swept in and rescued them in any obvious way, but simply because you existed. Simply because you were you. The memory of your smile or your voice or your way of being in the world was enough to give them what they needed to keep going. On the days when keeping going felt impossible, think about that for a moment. Think about the fact that while you were in your own struggle, while you were trying to hold yourself together, through the uncertainty and the waiting, your very existence was quietly saving someone else. That is the kind of love that most love songs are trying to describe, but rarely capture accurately. It is not the big sweeping gesture or the dramatic declaration, or the perfectly timed arrival. It is the steady, quiet, unbreakable presence of one soul in another soul's interior landscape. It is the way a person can carry you with them, even when you are nowhere near them, can be held together by the thought of you, even when the two of you are separated by distance or circumstance or fear. The letter is sealed now. Those words are out in the world. They are vibrating in the fabric of the cosmos at a frequency that cannot be undone, cannot be recalled, cannot be taken back. What has been said cannot be unsaid. What has been confessed cannot be unconfessed. The truth that was locked behind iron gates for so long has finally walked out into the open. And it is standing in the light, and it is not going anywhere. And now what you need to do, dear soul, is receive it. That might sound like the simple part, but receiving love, after a long period of doubting whether it exists, is its own kind of work. When you have spent months or years bracing yourself against the possibility of not being loved, when you have built up certain walls of your own, not as high as theirs perhaps, but walls nonetheless, made of the reasonable, sensible decision to protect yourself from further disappointment, then allowing love in requires a kind of deliberate and conscious opening that takes courage. It requires you to lower your guard, to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop, to resist the temptation to immediately look for the catch, or the flaw, or the reason. This cannot be as real as it seems. You are allowed to believe this. You are allowed to let it be true, without immediately surrounding it with conditions and qualifications, and cautious asterisks. You are allowed to feel the full warmth of being loved by someone who fought through their own fear to say so. You are allowed to put down the doubt you have been carrying like a backpack full of stones. You have been carrying it for so long that you might not even realize how heavy it has made you, how much energy you have been spending just keeping yourself upright under the weight of it. Put it down, you do not need it anymore. The waiting was not in vain. Every moment of it, even the hardest moments, even the nights when you were so tired of hoping that you considered giving up entirely, even the days when you convinced yourself that the sensible thing was to close the door and walk away from the whole thing, every single one of those moments was part of the path, not because suffering is necessary, or because love requires you to prove yourself through pain, but because the timing of things is rarely in our hands, and what looks from inside, the waiting like wasted time, often looks from a wider view, like the exact amount of time that was needed for everything to move into place. They needed time to fight their war. They needed time to lose enough of the battles against their own heart that they finally accepted. They were not going to win. They needed time to wear themselves down to the point where the truth felt less terrifying than continuing to hold it back. That time was not empty. That time was not lost. That time was the cocoon phase, the period of invisible transformation that had to happen before what was real between you could emerge into the open and be what it truly is. And from where we sit, watching all of this unfold, with a perspective that takes in the whole arc of the story, rather than just the middle chapters where the confusion lives, we want you to know something that is very easy to forget when you are in the thick of living your life. Every single moment that felt like too much, every night that felt too long, every silence that felt too loud, every wave of doubt that crashed over you when you were already exhausted, every single one of those moments was leading to this one, to the sealed letter, to the confession, to the surrender of someone who loves you standing in the open at last, and saying so. You are loved. Let that be the thing you carry with you now. Instead of the doubt, and the waiting, and the weight of all those unanswered questions. You are loved in the way that changes the internal landscape of a person. You are loved in the way that makes someone stay, when every logical force in their world is telling them to go. You are loved in the way that poets try to describe, and usually fall short of, because the love that holds someone in place against the full force of their own fear is not the kind of thing that fits easily into words, even beautiful words, even carefully chosen words. You were worth staying for. You were worth fighting for. Not in spite of the difficulty, not as a consolation prize after a long and hard road, but simply because that is the truth, that is who you are, and what you mean to this person, and what the two of you mean to each other, in the grand, complicated, beautiful design of things. You were always the reason they held on, from the very beginning. Before they had the words for it, before they had the courage for it, before they were ready to admit it even to themselves, you were the reason. The quiet, steady, enduring reason, the harbor, the lighthouse, the anchor they could not cut loose. And now the letter is sealed, and the truth is out, and the long night of wondering is finally giving way to something brighter. Breathe, dear soul, just breathe. The love was always real, and now you know.